One of the most consistently like crazy making things to me is how in every single area of their life, men really want to have their cake and eat it too. All the freedom with none of the responsibility. So many things here that I really don't want to go unnoticed. Okay, starting with tip for women. I love this because everything he says after the sentence is exactly why women should never be taking tips from men. First of all, have a little self-awareness. Can't seriously say tip for women and then go ahead and describe like 7 different ways in which men are absolutely, completely useless. Why are you giving us tips? You are useless. I do not need tips from you, let alone any other woman. The second line is, most of us men really want to help but don't know how. Oh, one of those things has to be untrue. This sentence is a contradiction. If you really wanted to help, then you would figure out how. And if you don't know how to help, that means you don't really want to help. I don't even know if I need to say more than that. Let me think. No, I really don't. You can't say this with a straight face. You're lying about one of these 2 things. You're a liar. There's a reason that the phrase "if he wanted to, he would" exists, and that's because men consistently demonstrate this one thing, that if they wanted to, they would. But women demonstrate this too, except for it's actually expected of them. And it's actually a really normal thing to expect from other human beings. Like when they say they want to do something and then they don't do it, it's because they didn't actually want to. Then he says, give us a list. And now this is really the wanting to have your cake and eat it too part, because a lot of men like to be seen as the head of the household, the leader, the provider. Well, you know who doesn't need a fucking list? Is the actual head of the household, the leader, the provider. He or she does not need a list. So either you are a head of household, leader, provider, or you need a list. Otherwise, it's your wife that's all of those things. Because what you're trying to get her to do is the thing that like a CEO does. You're trying to get her to delegate tasks to those below her. Right then and there, you are admitting that you are not a partner, you're not a co-CEO or anything like that. You are an employee that needs to be managed. She employs you. And even if most of y'all can like swallow your pride and even agree to that and be like, okay, fine, she employs me, just give me a list. Most of y'all wouldn't even like pass the first round of interviews in order to even be given a list. Most of y'all couldn't even handle this. You can't even handle being managed completely from head to toe. This next line is a real joke. Like, this is the real joke. Give us list items weekly. We can take off your plate and we love to help. One thing I consistently hear from women who do these things, like give men lists and like explainers and draw pictures for them on how to do all of these things, is that they still don't do it anyway. This was just another form of like weaponized incompetence. To be like, no, give me a list. That way I don't fuck anything up. And you just don't even do it anyway. Somebody has to still ask you about every item on the list. And somebody has to go behind you and check your work on it. Like, again, most of y'all would not even be hired for the job. You are not the people that are qualified for this job. So therefore, you shouldn't even be part of a family unit. You're useless. If you need to be given a list, mind you, weekly. So these are probably like recurring items and you need to be given that list weekly. Like, you are the worst, actually. Guys, ask her, what can I take off your plate today? Guys, I want to ask you, what's on your plate? What's on your plate at all, other than going to work? Which, mind you, before y'all get too loud in the comments about providing, you would have to work if you lived alone. If you didn't have a wife, you would still have to work. And yes, so would she, but you need to realize that she is sacrificing a career, or God forbid she isn't sacrificing a career and she's working and you're still asking her to do this shit. Don't piss me off. She's sacrificing her career to probably stay home with your kids because she can't afford to have a career because daycare is so expensive in America. Therefore, she's actually doing a job, because otherwise you would have to give the kids over to daycare workers. So your wife is a daycare worker for your kids and she has to keep all of this on her plate. What's on your plate? Because you wouldn't be worried about taking things off of her plate if your plate was also full. And again, y'all are not leaders. Y'all are not initiative takers. Because if you were, you wouldn't be asking these fuck-ass, dumbass questions. What's on her plate, it sounds like, is everything. So what you need to do is look around and figure out what that everything is. And then you need to take things off her plate. That's the only way to take things off her plate, is to just do it yourself. Asking her what you can take off her plate today is like not only an insult and you showing your whole ass how you don't know anything, how you don't know how to run your own household, but it's also another task that you're adding to her plate. And mind you, again, she's probably gonna have to go behind you and double check all the work. Like, at some point, women actually give up on this completely and they're like, no, actually don't ask me, because it's easier for me to do it myself. And they're driven there by dumb fucking ideas like this. The key is solid communication around this. Tell me, please, what are you communicating? What do you have to communicate to your wife? Did you have to communicate to her that she has to take care of the children? Did you have to communicate to her how to do that? Did you have to communicate to her that she needs to put all this stuff on her plate so you can then take it off? No. So That's not the key then. The key is you pulling your head out of your ass and looking around with your eyes to do the things that need to be done, just like she does every single day, just like she does every single morning when she wakes up. She just looks around and she knows what to do, and nobody communicated that to her. So I repeat, that is not the key. You sure didn't have to communicate to her all the 100,000 things that she does every single day. We're finishing off strong with, we can't read minds. It's like the worst thing that men have taken to saying. Nobody's asking you to read a mind, sir. People just made the mistake of assuming that you are not a cruel and unempathetic and selfish narcissist. People assumed that you don't just walk through life with horse blinders on that blind you to anything that doesn't have to do with you or your dick. You walk around literally blind to everything else but the things that you want to care about. And women had to figure out how to read your mind around that. Your mind. That's why women have to make lists. That's why women have to offer, adult favors for y'all to do any of this. Because y'all won't do it on your own. Not because anyone's asking you to read their mind, but because people assumed that you had basic personhood and survival skills. People had to read your mind, because when your wife asks you to do things and you just say, yeah, I'll do it, and then you don't actually bother to do it, then she has to read your mind and figure out that you're not going to do it unless she makes a list, unless she reads your mind, unless she tells you what to take off her plate, unless she then goes behind you and checks all the work that you do, unless she then has to nag you on all of these things. Like, you won't care. And somebody had to read your mind to figure that out. It's exhausting, and then they had to explain it to you all on top of that. It's exhausting. I'm so glad that I live in the day and age where people like this get torn apart on the fucking internet for suggesting these fuck-ass solutions. Because this is just like a really long way around to weaponized incompetence. Putting yourself so much at the center of not only your own life, but at the lives of others, that you don't realize that not everything exists and fucking revolves around you. Most of y'all completely fuck your wife over with this. Even if she does do all of this, you get to decide when you do the tasks on those lists. You get to decide how those tasks are done, even though she's the one that has more experience with it. She's the one that has had to figure out the best way of going about something, not just the shortest, quickest, or laziest way. So when you try to do it and she tells you, hey, that's not going to work, you oftentimes defend your position and you refuse to do it any differently until it doesn't work, until it backfires. And then you have the nerve to get mad at her when you did something wrong and you can just refuse to do it ever again. So this is just the longest possible way, the longest, most insulting possible route towards what you're going to turn into weaponized incompetence anyway. You are incompetent. You are useless. If you ever wrote a tweet like this, or if you ever liked or reposted any shit like this, you are incompetent and you are useless. I hope that helps. Godspeed. Mwah.